I'm Ethan Mitchell, 34, and I never thought my success in real estate would lead to my own sister slapping me in front of 200 wedding guests. Kimberly and I always had a complicated relationship. But nothing prepared me for the moment her palm connected with my cheek as champagne glasses clinked silent and camera flashes froze in shock. What she didn't know was that among those gasping witnesses sat Judge Maxwell Harrison, whose keen eyes missed nothing. That single slap would change everything for both of us. Before I tell you how this wedding disaster turned into the most unexpected victory of my life, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button. The ending of this story shocked even me. Growing up in Boston with Kimberly, who's 3 years younger than me, we had what you'd call a typical middle-class childhood. Our father Michael worked as an accountant, putting in long hours especially during tax season, while our mother Rebecca taught second grade at the local elementary school. We weren't poor. But we definitely weren't rich either. Our parents stretched every dollar, teaching us the value of hard work and saving. At least, that's the lesson I took to heart. From an early age, I was fascinated by the concept of ownership and investment. While other kids in our neighborhood collected baseball cards or video games, I would ride my bike around different parts of Boston, noting which areas seemed to be improving and which houses were being renovated. By 13, I could tell you which neighborhoods were likely to increase in value based simply on new coffee shops opening or bus routes being added. "You have an old soul, Ethan," my father would say, both amused and impressed by my interest in real estate prices before I could even drive. Kimberly, on the other hand, developed different interests. She was sociable and charming, quickly becoming popular in school. She had an uncanny ability to identify which brands were trending and which social circles held the most influence. Where I saved my allowance and birthday money, Kimberly spent hers on whatever would impress her friends that week. "She's just enjoying her childhood," Mom would defend when Dad questioned the necessity of another designer backpack or expensive pair of shoes. This pattern continued into our college years. I attended Boston University on a partial scholarship, working 3 part-time jobs to cover the rest of my tuition and expenses. I worked at the campus bookstore mornings, delivered food evenings, and helped a local real estate agent on weekends, learning the business from the ground up. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford. But I graduated with minimal debt and a wealth of practical experience. During those same years, Kimberly attended a private liberal arts college, changing her major 3 times and extending what should have been a 4-year degree into 6. Our parents remortgaged their house to help cover her expenses, while my offers to help were met with pride from my father. "You're just starting out, son. We've got this handled," he'd insist, the new stress lines around his eyes telling a different story. At 23, while Kimberly was still figuring out her career path, I took every dollar I had saved plus a small loan and purchased my first property. It was a condemned duplex in an area that the city had targeted for revitalization. For 6 months, I lived in my car and showered at the gym while pouring every waking hour into renovating that property myself. "You're crazy," Kimberly laughed when she saw the property. "This place should be bulldozed, not bought." 6 months later, when I sold that duplex for nearly triple my investment, her laughter stopped. I rolled the profits into 2 more distressed properties, establishing a pattern that would define the next decade of my life. Buy, renovate, sell, or sometimes hold and rent. Each property became a stepping stone to the next opportunity. By 28, I owned a modest portfolio of rental properties generating enough passive income for me to focus on larger commercial projects. I partnered with developers, learned the ins and outs of zoning laws, and built relationships with city officials who appreciated my commitment to quality renovations that improved neighborhoods rather than just extracting maximum profit. Through all of this, Kimberly's path took different turns. She worked briefly in fashion retail, then tried her hand at social media marketing, followed by event planning. Each new career started with enthusiasm but ended with complaints about demanding bosses or clients who didn't appreciate her vision. between jobs. She would inevitably need small loans from our parents or, increasingly, from me. It's just until my next paycheck, she would promise, though the repayments rarely materialized. Our parents continued to enable her, afraid to push their daughter toward true independence. I watched with growing concern as they delayed their retirement. Cited market conditions as the reason they couldn't sell their house and downsize as planned. When I turned 30, I finally allowed myself a personal indulgence. After helping countless clients find their dream homes, I purchased mine. A penthouse in one of Boston's most sought-after buildings, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the city and harbor. The previous owner had fallen into financial trouble, allowing me to purchase it below market value. Though it still represented the largest single investment I'd ever made for myself rather than my business. For 3 months, I worked with architects and craftsmen to transform the space. Brazilian hardwood floors, a kitchen that would make professional chefs envious, a master bathroom with a soaking tub positioned to watch the sunrise over the harbor. Every detail was chosen with care, creating not just a home but a sanctuary above the city where I had worked so hard to succeed. The first time my parents visited, they couldn't hide their amazement. "I never imagined my son would live in a place like this," my mother whispered, touching the marble countertops with reverence. When Kimberly visited, her reaction was different. She walked through each room with an evaluating eye, asking about the cost of everything, taking photos as if cataloging the space. "Must be nice," she said. Not quite meeting my eyes. "Some people just have all the luck." That comment stung because luck had little to do with my success. What she saw as an overnight achievement represented thousands of early mornings, late nights, and sacrificed weekends. Where she saw lucky breaks, I knew there had been careful research and calculated risks. As my business continued to grow, so did the frequency of Kimberly's financial emergencies. An unexpected tax bill here, car repairs there. Or sometimes just being short on rent this month. I helped when I could, especially when I knew it would otherwise fall on our parents, but I began setting boundaries. "I can help you find a financial advisor," I offered once, after covering her rent for the 3rd time in a year. "I don't need financial advice," she snapped. "I need a brother who doesn't make me feel like a charity case every time I need a little help." Despite these tensions, we maintained a civil relationship for our parents' sake. At family gatherings, we would exchange pleasant small talk, carefully avoiding any mention of money or careers. It was an uneasy truce that I believed would eventually improve as Kimberly found her footing in adulthood. I had no idea that her next step would be the one that brought our simmering tensions to a very public boil. When Kimberly announced her engagement to Bradford Wells, I was genuinely happy for her. Bradford came from a well-established family that owned a regional banking chain in New England. He had an Ivy League education, a partner position at a prestigious law firm, and most importantly, he seemed to truly care for my sister. For the first time in years, I felt optimistic about Kimberly's future. "He's different, Ethan," she told me over coffee, shortly after announcing the engagement. Her diamond ring caught the light, impressive without being ostentatious. "Bradford understands me. He sees my potential." "I'm happy for you, Kim," I said, meaning it. "He seems like a good guy." A week later, Kimberly suggested dinner so I could really get to know Bradford. We met at an upscale steakhouse, and initially, the conversation flowed easily. Bradford was articulate and seemed knowledgeable about various investment strategies, asking thoughtful questions about my business approach. "Your sister tells me you have quite the eye for undervalued properties," he said, swirling his bourbon. "That's a rare talent." "It's more about research than talent," I replied. "Anyone can do it with enough time and attention to detail." As the evening progressed, I noticed subtle tensions. When Bradford mentioned possibly looking for a new home after the wedding, Kimberly immediately locked eyes with me. "You should show Bradford your penthouse sometime," she said, her voice overly casual. It's exactly the kind of place we've been discussing. Bradford looked slightly uncomfortable but nodded. I've heard it's quite something. That dinner ended cordially, but Kimberly's comment stuck with me. 3 days later, she called asking if she could bring Bradford by to see the penthouse that weekend. Just for ideas, she explained. We're gathering inspiration for our future home. I agreed. And that Saturday they arrived with a bottle of wine and excessive compliments. This view is absolutely incredible, Kimberly gushed, even though she'd seen it before. Bradford. Isn't this exactly what we've been talking about? Bradford nodded politely, though I caught him glancing at Kimberly with a slight frown in his brow. Throughout the tour, Kimberly took dozens of photos, documenting every room, every feature. She asked detailed questions about the building's amenities, the homeowners association, even the neighbors. When we reached the master bedroom with its harbor view, she sighed dramatically. I've always dreamed of living in a place like this, she said, running her hand along the custom built-in shelving. Waking up to this view every morning must be life-changing. It definitely makes the years of work worthwhile, I agreed, deliberately emphasizing the effort that had gone into affording such a place. That visit was just the beginning. As wedding planning began in earnest, Kimberly's expectations grew increasingly extravagant. She selected one of Boston's most exclusive venues, chose designer bridesmaid dresses, and planned a honeymoon that would span 3 different European countries. 2 months into planning, she called me to discuss something important. Over lunch at a cafe near my office, she revealed the actual purpose of our meeting. So, the wedding budget is looking a bit tight, she began, stirring her latte. Mom and Dad are contributing what they can, and Bradford's parents are handling the rehearsal dinner and alcohol for the reception. That sounds reasonable, I replied, already sensing where this was heading. The thing is, she continued, leaning forward, we're still about 50,000 short for what we need to create the day I've always dreamed of. Since you're not married and don't have kids, I was hoping you might contribute as your wedding gift to us. Though the amount shocked me, I took a deep breath. This was my sister's wedding, an important milestone. After some negotiation, I agreed to contribute, though I set clear expectations that this would be in lieu of any other wedding gift. You're the best brother, she squealed, hugging me across the table. This wedding is going to be incredible. With my financial commitment secured, Kimberly's demands only escalated. She began sending me links to expensive items she wanted as pre-wedding gifts. A designer handbag to carry for the rehearsal dinner. A specific brand of champagne for the bridal suite. Each request came with the explanation that these things would make the wedding photos even more special. 3 months before the wedding, Kimberly called with what she termed an amazing idea. What would you think about us having the wedding reception at your penthouse? She asked, excitement bubbling in her voice. It would be so much more personal than the hotel ballroom. Kim, the building has strict rules about events, I explained. There's a limit of 20 guests for any private gathering, specifically to prevent large parties. Plus, there's no way we could fit 200 people in my place, even if we moved all the furniture out. Her disappointment was palpable, even through the phone. But you're on the homeowner's board. Right. Couldn't you get an exception made? Just this once? It doesn't work that way, I said. And honestly, the venue you've booked is far better equipped to handle your reception. She ended the call abruptly, and within an hour, my mother called. Ethan, honey, Kimberly's very upset, she began. She says you're not being supportive of her special day. I explained the situation, emphasizing the physical impossibility of hosting such a large event in my home. I understand, my mother sighed. But you know how she gets when she has her heart set on something. Maybe you could at least let her take some bridal portraits there? It would mean so much to her. To keep the peace? I agreed to the photo session, hoping this compromise would satisfy Kimberly. It didn't. At every family dinner leading up to the wedding, she found ways to mention my penthouse. Always with a hint of envy tinging her words. Bradford and I were looking at apartments yesterday, she would say. Nothing compares to Ethan's place, of course. We'd be lucky to find something half as nice for what we can afford. I noticed Bradford's expressions during these comments. He seemed uncomfortable. Sometimes even embarrassed by Kimberly's not-so-subtle hints. Once, when Kimberly stepped away from the table, he leaned toward me. She doesn't speak for both of us, he said quietly. The constant comparisons are her thing, not mine. I appreciated his honesty and thought perhaps he might be a moderating influence on my sister once they were married. That hope, however, would soon be thoroughly shattered. 3 months before the wedding, Kimberly called asking to see the penthouse again. Bradford has some design ideas he wants to run by you, she explained. He thinks your place has the perfect layout for what we want in our future home. I agreed, thinking this might be a genuine attempt to patch things up after the venue disagreement. When they arrived that Saturday afternoon, everything seemed normal at first. Bradford complimented a new art piece I'd acquired, and Kimberly seemed less intense than during their previous visit. After a brief tour and some casual conversation in the living room, Kimberly set her wine glass down and straightened her posture. A signal I recognized from childhood as her preparing to say something significant. "Ethan, we have something important to discuss with you," she began, reaching for Bradford's hand. "We've been thinking a lot about our future and where we want to start our married life." Bradford shifted slightly in his seat but maintained a neutral expression. "The thing is," Kimberly continued, her voice taking on a practiced quality, "we've fallen in love with this penthouse. The location is perfect, the layout is exactly what we want. And it already feels like home to me when I visit." I felt a creeping sense of unease but waited for her to reach her point. "We want your penthouse as our wedding gift," she stated plainly. "You have multiple properties, and you don't need this specific one. It would mean everything to us to start our marriage here." The silence that followed felt eternal. I looked from Kimberly's expectant face to Bradford, who couldn't quite meet my eyes. "That's not possible," I finally said, keeping my voice level. "This isn't just an investment property, Kim. This is my home." Her expression hardened. "You can buy another home anywhere. This building has special meaning for me too. Remember? Dad used to drive us past here when we were kids and tell us maybe someday we could live somewhere like this." "I remember," I acknowledged. "That's partly why I worked so hard to be able to buy it. But that doesn't mean I'm willing to give it to you. It's not like we're asking for a handout," she countered, her voice rising slightly. "We're family. Family supports each other's dreams. My dream is to live here." Bradford finally spoke up, his lawyer's training evident in his measured tone. "What Kimberly means is that we're prepared to be reasonable about this. Perhaps we could discuss some kind of arrangement. A delayed purchase agreement, maybe, at a family rate." "There's no arrangement to discuss," I stated firmly. "The penthouse is not for sale, not at any price right now. I'm happy to help you find something similar, or even contribute to a down payment on another property as a wedding gift, but this place is not an option." Kimberly's face flushed with anger. "You're being selfish. You know that? You sit up here in your perfect little palace while Mom and Dad are still working past retirement age. Meanwhile, you won't even help your sister get a decent start in life." "I've helped you plenty over the years," I reminded her, fighting to keep my own temper in check. "And I've helped Mom and Dad too, more than you know. They could retire tomorrow if they wanted to. The only reason they don't is because they're still supporting you in ways they shouldn't need to at your age." That struck a nerve. Kimberly stood up, grabbing her purse. "This is exactly why I didn't want to ask you. I told Bradford you'd be impossible." She turned to him. "Let's go." Bradford rose more slowly, looking uncomfortable but committed to standing by his fiancée. "Perhaps we can discuss this when emotions aren't so high," he suggested. "There's nothing to discuss," Kimberly snapped. At the door, she turned back to me. "If that's how you feel, maybe you shouldn't come to the wedding at all. I wouldn't want your generosity to be further imposed upon." After they left, I sat in stunned silence, trying to process what had just happened. Within an hour, my phone was buzzing with text messages from my parents, both expressing disappointment that I had upset Kimberly so badly, this close to her wedding. 2 days later, I received a disturbing call from Casey, a friend who worked for a real estate agency that specialized in luxury properties. "Ethan, something weird happened today. Your sister came in asking about comparable properties to yours in the building. She was telling everyone that she and her fiancé would be moving into your penthouse after their wedding. She was even asking about listing her current apartment." My stomach dropped. That's not true at all. I just refused to give them my place as a wedding gift. That's not how she's telling it. Casey warned. She made it sound like a done deal, just pending some paperwork after the wedding. This revelation prompted me to call my parents and clarify the situation. The conversation did not go well. "Of course, we don't expect you to give them your penthouse," my father said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "But would it really hurt you to let them live there for a year or two while they save for their own place? You're always traveling for business anyway." "Dad, that's not what Kimberly asked for. She wants me to give her the penthouse outright, as a wedding gift." "Well, maybe you misunderstood," my mother chimed in from the extension. "Kimberly says you barely let her explain before shutting her down." It became clear that Kimberly had given them a very different version of our conversation. Rather than argue further, I suggested we all meet for dinner to discuss the situation calmly. That dinner became the site of the next escalation. At a private room in my parents' favorite restaurant, Kimberly arrived with Bradford and immediately took control of the narrative. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," she began sweetly. "We never expected Ethan to simply give us the penthouse for nothing. We were hoping to discuss a family arrangement where we could live there while paying him something fair." "That's not what you said at my place," I pointed out. "You specifically asked for it as a wedding gift." "I meant the opportunity as a gift," she countered smoothly. "The chance to live somewhere so special, even if we pay for it." Bradford nodded along, though I noticed he let Kimberly do all the talking. My father, ever the mediator, suggested a compromise. "What if they rent it from you for a couple of years? That way they get to live there, but you maintain ownership." Before I could respond, Kimberly jumped in. "Actually, we were thinking more of a rent-own situation. We pay monthly, and after a few years, the place becomes ours." "At what price?" I asked. Though I already knew no number would make this acceptable to me. "Well, a family discount would be appropriate," she replied. "Maybe 30% below market value?" The conversation continued in this vein, with every reasonable objection I raised being met with accusations of selfishness or lack of family loyalty. My parents, though not overtly taking sides, kept pushing for me to, at least consider, increasingly unreasonable proposals. When I offered alternative gifts, including a substantial down payment on a different property, or even a luxury car, Kimberly dismissed these options as missing the point. "It's not about the money," she insisted. "It's about family supporting each other. That penthouse represents everything I've ever wanted." As the evening wore on, Bradford finally spoke up during a moment when Kimberly stepped away to take a call. "I feel I should mention," he said in a lowered voice, "that there might be some legal entitlement to family property in situations like this. Not that we'd want to go that route, but it's something to consider." The implied threat stunned me. "Are you suggesting you might sue me for my home?" Bradford backpedaled quickly. No, just mentioning that family law can be complex. I'm sure we'll work something out amicably." After that dinner, I did some research of my own and discovered through mutual connections that Bradford's position at his law firm might not be as secure as it appeared. There were rumors of financial improprieties being investigated, though nothing had been made public yet. 2 weeks before the wedding, I received a text from Kimberly that made my blood run cold. "Give us the penthouse or I'll make sure you regret coming to my wedding. Last chance to do the right thing." Concerned about the escalating situation, I consulted my friend Mark, an attorney who specialized in real estate law. After hearing the full story, he advised caution. Document everything, he warned. Save texts, emails, voicemails. If they're making these kinds of demands before the wedding, I'm concerned about what might happen after. Despite the growing tension and vague threats, I decided to attend the wedding. Whatever our disagreements, Kimberly was still my sister, and I held out hope that once the wedding stress passed, we might find a way forward. I had no idea just how publicly this private family drama was about to explode. The Harrington Estate Gardens looked like something from a fairy tale on Kimberly's wedding day. Rows of white chairs adorned with lilies and ivy lined the manicured lawn. A flower-covered arch stood at the end of a rose-petal-strewn aisle. String quartet music drifted through the air as guests in formal attire mingled, champagne flutes in hand. I arrived early, helping my parents find their seats in the front row. My father looked distinguished in his new suit, my mother elegant in a powder blue dress that had been carefully selected not to overshadow the bride. They both seemed tense, our recent disagreements casting a shadow over what should have been an uncomplicated happy occasion. You look nice, son, my father said, adjusting his tie nervously. Let's all just focus on making this a beautiful day for your sister, all right? That's why I'm here, I assured him, meaning it sincerely. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Whatever my personal feelings about Kimberly's recent behavior, I couldn't deny the genuine emotion in her voice as she recited her vows. Bradford, too, seemed moved, his normally composed demeanor softening as he promised to love and cherish my sister. From my seat, I noticed Judge Maxwell Harrison among the guests. I recognized him from news articles about prominent Boston legal cases. He sat straight-backed in the third row on the groom's side, his expression thoughtful as he observed the proceedings. I remembered Bradford mentioning that several colleagues and professional connections would be attending. After the ceremony, guests moved to the reception area. An elegant tent with crystal chandeliers and tables adorned with elaborate floral centerpieces. I found my assigned seat at a table with distant cousins and family friends, notably far from the main wedding party table. Next to my place setting, I left my wedding gift, a card containing a generous check, far exceeding the typical wedding present but less than the extravagant demands Kimberly had made. For the first hour of the reception, everything proceeded smoothly. I made polite conversation with my tablemates, applauded the wedding party introductions, and genuinely hoped that the day might conclude without incident. When Kimberly approached my table during the meal, her bridal gown shimmering under the chandeliers, I felt a momentary sense of optimism. "Ethan," she said, her voice warm and her smile bright, "could we chat privately for a moment?" I followed her to a quiet corner of the tent, hopeful that this might be an olive branch, a chance to set aside our recent conflict. "You look beautiful," I told her sincerely. The ceremony was perfect. "Thank you," she replied, touching my arm lightly. "Listen, I know things have been tense between us lately. I want us to move past that. Family is too important." Relief washed over me. "I completely agree. I never wanted this conflict between us." "Good," she nodded, her smile widening. "Then you'll come up when Bradford's father finishes his speech? I've arranged a special moment for us to clear the air publicly." Though something about her eagerness gave me pause, I agreed. After all, a public reconciliation might be exactly what we needed to move forward. 20 minutes later, Bradford's father concluded his emotional toast to the new couple. Applause filled the tent as he embraced his son and new daughter-in-law. As the applause died down, Kimberly took the microphone, her expression radiant. "Thank you all so much for sharing this perfect day with us," she began, scanning the crowd of 200 guests. "Before we continue the celebrations, there's someone very special I want to acknowledge." Her eyes found me. "My brother Ethan. Could you join me up here?" Feeling slightly self-conscious but committed to supporting this gesture of reconciliation, I made my way to the front. Kimberly threw her arm around my shoulder as cameras flashed. Many of you know that my big brother has always been the successful one in our family, she said into the microphone, triggering appreciative chuckles from the crowd. What you might not know is that he's also incredibly generous. An uncomfortable feeling began to grow in my stomach. Ethan has been so supportive throughout the wedding planning, she continued, tightening her grip on my shoulder. And Bradford and I are so excited to announce a special gift that means the world to us. Confusion washed over me as she turned to face me directly, the microphone still capturing every word. Would you like to tell everyone about the penthouse you promised us? She asked. Her voice sweet but her eyes challenging. The tent fell silent. 200 pairs of eyes fixed on me as the trap became clear. Kimberly had orchestrated this moment, using social pressure to force my compliance. Deny her now, and I would be the villain who ruined her wedding day. Kimberly, I said quietly, trying to keep the conversation between us despite the microphone, we discussed this. I never promised you the penthouse. Her expression hardened for just a moment before she forced a laugh. He's so modest. Always downplaying his generosity. Kim, please. This isn't the time or place, I whispered. She turned to the audience again. My brother bought the most amazing penthouse in Boston 3 years ago. Top floor, harbor views, absolutely stunning. And now, as the perfect wedding gift, he's giving it to us to start our married life. Gasps and murmurs spread through the crowd. Some guests began to applaud uncertainly. I never agreed to that, I said firmly. No longer whispering. I'm happy to help you find your own place, but my home is not a wedding gift. The tent fell silent again. Kimberly's face flushed crimson. In that frozen moment, I saw rage, embarrassment, and calculation flash across her features. Then, with no warning, her hand whipped through the air and connected with my cheek with a crack that seemed to echo through the silent tent. You promised us that penthouse and now you're backing out, she hissed, loud enough for the front tables to hear clearly. How dare you humiliate me at my own wedding? The shock of the slap paralyzed me momentarily. I was vaguely aware of gasps, of Bradford rushing forward, of my mother's cry of distress. But most clearly, I registered Judge Harrison's intent gaze, his hand moving to make notes on his phone. Bradford reached us, looking mortified. Kimberly, please, he muttered, trying to guide her away from the microphone. I found my voice, keeping it level despite the burning handprint on my cheek. I never made such a promise. Without another word, I walked away. Past the shocked faces of guests, past my parents' conflicted expressions, out of the tent and to my car. As I drove home, my phone exploded with notifications. Friends who had witnessed the scene expressed concern, family members demanded explanations, and even acquaintances reached out, drawn by the drama of the moment. That night, alone in my penthouse, the very space that had become the center of this conflict, I sat in darkness looking out at the harbor lights. The physical sting of the slap had faded, but the public humiliation and the breach of trust cut far deeper. I wondered if this was the end of my relationship with my sister, and what repercussions this very public incident would have for our family. I had no idea that the most shocking twist in this story was yet to come. By morning, the wedding slap had taken on a life of its own. A guest had captured the moment on video, and though it didn't include the full context of our conversation, the image of the bride slapping her brother at the reception spread quickly through social media channels. Kimberly had wasted no time crafting her narrative. The version circulating online, helped by comments from her and her friends, painted me as the villain who had reneged on a promise, leaving the newlyweds without their expected home. In this telling, the slap became an understandable emotional reaction rather than a calculated public manipulation. My parents called early, their disappointment evident in every word. How could you do this to your sister on her wedding day? My mother asked, her voice thick with emotion. If you had concerns about the penthouse arrangement, you should have discussed it privately, not created a scene at the reception. I didn't create the scene, I protested. Kimberly blindsided me with a public announcement about a gift I never offered or agreed to. My father sighed heavily. Son, we understand you're attached to your place. But surely there was a better way to handle this. Now everyone's talking about the slap instead of celebrating their marriage. It became clear that they had accepted Kimberly's version of events. At least partially. After years of mediating her demands, it was easier for them to see me as partly responsible for the conflict rather than acknowledge the full extent of her manipulation. I spent the day fielding messages from concerned friends and colleagues who had either witnessed the incident or seen the viral video. By afternoon, I had turned off my phone notifications and was seriously considering taking a trip away from Boston until the gossip died down. Just as I was researching flights, an email notification appeared on my laptop. The sender was unexpected, Judge Maxwell Harrison. The subject line read simply, regarding yesterday's incident. Important. My first instinct was caution. Why would a judge who barely knew me be reaching out? Was this related to Bradford's vague legal threats? I opened the email with trepidation. Mr. Mitchell, I was a guest at yesterday's unfortunate incident. I believe it would be beneficial for us to speak privately at your earliest convenience. There are matters concerning your sister and her new husband that may be relevant to your situation. I can make myself available at my chambers tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. if that suits you. Please confirm. Regards, Judge Maxwell Harrison. After consideration, I replied accepting the meeting. Whatever the judge wanted to discuss, it seemed prudent to hear him out. The following morning, I arrived at the Suffolk County Courthouse and was escorted to Judge Harrison's chambers. The judge, a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and penetrating blue eyes, greeted me with a firm handshake. Thank you for coming, Mr. Mitchell, he said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. I apologize for the mysterious nature of my email, but I felt this conversation needed to happen in person. I appreciate you reaching out, I replied cautiously, though I'm still not clear on why a judge would take interest in a family disagreement. Judge Harrison leaned back in his chair, studying me carefully. I recognized your sister immediately at the wedding. Not from any prior introduction, but from my courtroom. My confusion must have been evident, as he continued without prompting. 3 years ago, I presided over a divorce case. Your sister was not a party to the case, but she was named repeatedly in the proceedings as having a relationship with the husband while he was still married. Kimberly? I asked, stunned. I had no idea. The case was sealed at the request of both parties, which is not unusual in high-profile divorces. The husband was a partner at Caldwell and Schmidt. The law firm name registered immediately. That's where Bradford works. Worked, Harrison corrected. Bradford was an associate at the time. The partner was Winston Caldwell, who was 25 years older than your sister, and quite wealthy. The affair ended when Mrs. Caldwell discovered it and filed for divorce. Your sister was dismissed from her event planning position at the firm shortly after. My mind raced, trying to process this information and understand its relevance to my current situation. I wouldn't normally share any of this, the judge continued, but yesterday I overheard something that concerned me professionally and ethically. He folded his hands on the desk. During the cocktail hour, before you arrived at the reception, I was seated near Mr. Wells and your sister. They were speaking quietly, but quite intently. I heard your name mentioned repeatedly, along with the word penthouse. What caught my attention was Mr. Wells saying, and I quote, "Once we establish residency, the verbal contract angle becomes much stronger." A chill ran through me. They're planning to sue me for my home? It appears so. More concerning was your sister's response. I've already photographed all his paperwork from the Home Office. Mark says that's enough to establish the claim. Mark? I asked, the name triggering alarm bells. I gathered it's someone at Bradford's firm. Later, I heard them mention preparing documents claiming you had verbally promised the property as a wedding gift, with the intent to file immediately after returning from their honeymoon. I sat back, processing the calculated nature of their plan. "Why are you telling me this?" Judge Harrison's expression became solemn. "I've been on the bench for 27 years, Mr. Mitchell. I've seen countless family disputes, inheritance battles, divorce proceedings. What I witnessed yesterday and overheard beforehand suggests something beyond a family misunderstanding. It appears to be a deliberate attempt to use legal means to acquire your property through fraudulent claims." "I still don't understand why you'd get involved," I said. "I don't typically get involved in matters outside my courtroom," he acknowledged. "But I cannot stand by watching fraud being planned. Especially when it involves the legal system I've dedicated my life to upholding." He opened a drawer and withdrew a business card. "I've taken the liberty of speaking with a colleague who specializes in property law. She can advise you on protective measures." As I took the card, Harrison added, "There's something else you should know. Bradford Wells is currently under investigation by the Bar Association. Nothing public yet. But there are serious concerns about financial improprieties in his handling of client accounts. This explained Bradford's desperate interest in my penthouse. He wasn't just supporting Kimberly's wishes, he had his own pressing financial motivations." "What should I do?" I asked. "Protect yourself," Harrison advised. "I'd suggest starting with security footage from your building. If your sister was photographing documents in your home office, that would be valuable evidence of premeditation." After leaving Harrison's chambers, I immediately called the security company that monitored my building. They confirmed they could provide footage from the dates of Kimberly's visits. Next, I contacted my friend Mark, the attorney I had consulted before the wedding. Mark was appalled by what Judge Harrison had shared. "This goes beyond family disagreement into potential criminal territory," he said gravely. "If they're planning to forge documents or make false claims about verbal contracts, that's fraud." At Mark's suggestion, we hired a private investigator to look into Bradford's financial situation and professional standing. Within days, the investigator returned with a troubling report. Bradford was indeed under investigation for misappropriation of client funds. His spending pattern over the past year showed mounting debt and multiple maxed-out credit cards. Most telling was a series of consultations with a bankruptcy attorney just weeks before proposing to Kimberly. The security footage from my building revealed even more. During one visit when I had briefly stepped out to take a phone call, cameras captured Kimberly entering my home office and photographing documents on my desk, including property deeds and financial statements. On another occasion, she had taken photos of my signature on various documents. Armed with this evidence, Mark, Judge Harrison, and I met to develop a strategy. Rather than waiting for them to attack, we would confront them with what we knew. "They're counting on emotional manipulation and family pressure," Mark explained. "When confronted with hard evidence of their plan, they'll likely back down rather than risk legal consequences." Judge Harrison nodded in agreement. "People who resort to these tactics typically fold when their bluff is called. They're counting on you being too embarrassed or concerned about family harmony to fight back effectively." With our strategy in place, I prepared for a confrontation I never imagined having with my own sister. The naive hope I'd harbored that our relationship could be repaired was gone, replaced by the cold realization that I needed to protect myself from the very people I should have been able to trust most. Mark arranged for the meeting to take place at his law office, a neutral but formal setting that would underscore the seriousness of the situation. We scheduled it for the day after Kimberly and Bradford were due to return from their honeymoon, not wanting to give them time to file any fraudulent claims. The conference room was meticulously prepared. A large monitor was set up to display the security footage if needed. Copies of the private investigator's report were placed in folders at each seat. Judge Harrison had agreed to join us, lending both his witness testimony and the gravitas of his position to our side. At precisely 10 o'clock, Kimberly and Bradford arrived with their attorney, Connor Williams, a sharp-featured man known for aggressive litigation tactics. Their expressions registered surprise at seeing Judge Harrison, though they maintained composed facades as introductions were made. "I must say, this all seems rather dramatic," Kimberly commented, settling into her chair with practiced casualness. "If you wanted to discuss wedding gifts, Ethan, a simple phone call would have sufficed." "This isn't about wedding gifts," I replied evenly. "It's about your plan to fraudulently claim ownership of my home." Bradford leaned forward, his lawyer's instincts kicking in. "That's a serious accusation. I hope you have something to substantiate such claims." Mark nodded to me, and I slid a folder across the table. "Inside you'll find photographs of Kimberly taking unauthorized pictures of my personal financial documents during visits to my home. You'll also find a transcript of your conversation at the wedding reception, discussing how to establish a false verbal contract claim once you established residency in my penthouse." The color drained from Bradford's face as he flipped through the contents. Kimberly maintained her composure longer, though her knuckles whitened as she gripped the edge of the folder. "This is absurd," she declared, though her voice lacked conviction. "Taking photos of a home I admired is hardly criminal. And any conversation about residency was purely hypothetical." "Perhaps," Mark interjected, "but the security footage showing you entering Mr. Mitchell's private office while he was taking a call and photographing his financial documents and signature samples is far less ambiguous." At this, Williams leaned over to whisper urgently to his clients. The hushed conversation grew increasingly tense, with Bradford shaking his head repeatedly. I continued, "We also have evidence of Bradford's consultations with bankruptcy attorneys prior to your engagement, and documentation of the Bar Association's ongoing investigation into financial improprieties at his firm." Bradford's composure cracked entirely. "Who told you about that?" he demanded, his voice rising. "Those proceedings are confidential." "So was the Caldwell divorce." Judge Harrison spoke for the first time, his deep voice commanding immediate attention. "Yet here we are." The mention of the Caldwell name caused both Kimberly and Bradford to freeze. Their shared look of panic confirmed everything. Williams attempted to regain control of the situation. "My clients categorically deny any fraudulent intent. If there have been misunderstandings regarding Mr. Mitchell's property, we're certainly open to clarifying those now." The time for clarification was before they began planning legal action based on fabricated claims, Mark countered. "At this point, we're discussing potential consequences, not misunderstandings." I pressed the advantage while they were off balance. "We have two options here. First, you both sign legally binding statements acknowledging that I never promised the penthouse and relinquishing any claims to my property. You also agree to make public retractions of the story you've been spreading since the wedding." "And the second option?" Williams asked cautiously. "We proceed with filing criminal charges for attempted fraud, plus civil action for defamation and emotional distress. Given the evidence we've compiled, including Judge Harrison's witness testimony, I believe our case would be quite compelling." The room fell silent as the gravity of the situation settled over everyone. Bradford's shoulders slumped in defeat, while Kimberly's expression cycled through shock, anger, and finally, calculation. Williams requested a private moment with his clients. When they returned 10 minutes later, the atmosphere had shifted dramatically. Bradford looked utterly defeated, while Kimberly's earlier confidence had been replaced by a brittle, defensive posture. "My clients are willing to sign the statements you've requested," Williams announced. "However, they request discretion regarding the Bar Association investigation and other personal matters discussed today." As Mark began reviewing the legal documents we had prepared, an unexpected development occurred. Bradford suddenly pushed back from the table. "I can't do this anymore," he declared, ignoring Williams' attempt to silence him. "Kimberly, tell them the truth." Now, when she remained silent, her jaw clenched stubbornly, Bradford turned to me directly. "The penthouse scheme was entirely Kimberly's idea," he admitted. "I knew it was wrong. But she insisted it was just family business, that you could afford it, and owed her after your success. Bradford, stop talking immediately, Williams warned. No, I'm done. Bradford continued, his professional demeanor crumbling. She told me you had verbally promised the penthouse multiple times. It was only at the wedding that I realized you had never made any such promise. Kimberly's facade finally shattered. You ungrateful coward, she hissed at Bradford. After everything I've done for you. Done for me? Bradford laughed bitterly. You mean like forging my signature on those preliminary documents? Or telling my parents I was handling the housing situation when you were the one scheming behind everyone's backs? Mark signaled to me subtly, and I nodded my understanding. As Bradford and Kimberly's argument escalated, revealing more damning details with each exchange, Mark quietly activated the recording device on the table. Judge Harrison finally intervened, his authoritative voice cutting through the chaos. That's enough. Ms. Mitchell, Mr. Wells, I suggest you both consider very carefully the legal implications of what's been discussed today before making any further statements. With the confrontation having yielded far more admissions than we'd anticipated, Mark guided the meeting back to the legal documents. By noon, both Kimberly and Bradford had signed statements acknowledging that no promise regarding the penthouse had ever been made in relinquishing any potential claims to the property. Additionally, they agreed to make public statements correcting the narrative about the wedding incident. Bradford, seemingly eager to distance himself from the entire situation, also signed a separate statement detailing Kimberly's unauthorized photographing of documents and her plan to establish fraudulent claims. As they prepared to leave, Kimberly finally addressed me directly, tears welling in her eyes. You could have just helped us, Ethan. That's what family does. Family doesn't exploit each other, I replied quietly. Family doesn't manipulate, lie, or try to take what isn't freely given. Her tears dried instantly, replaced by cold anger. You'll regret this. When Mom and Dad hear how you've treated us. They already know, I interrupted. I called them this morning and explained everything. They're devastated, but they understand now what's been happening. This final revelation seemed to deflate Kimberly completely. Without another word, she gathered her purse and left, Bradford trailing behind her with an apologetic glance back at me. The aftermath unfolded rapidly. By evening, I had received confirmation that Bradford had filed for an annulment, citing fraud and misrepresentation. My parents called, their voices heavy with shock and remorse. We had no idea how far this had gone, my mother said. All these years, we thought we were supporting her through rough patches, not enabling this kind of behavior. We owe you an apology, son, my father added. We should have seen the pattern long ago. Within days, Kimberly's carefully constructed social image began to unravel. As agreed, she posted a public retraction about the wedding incident, though the damage to her reputation was already substantial. Bradford's family, learning of the attempted fraud and the earlier Caldwell affair, publicly distanced themselves from her. Most painfully for Kimberly, our parents finally established firm boundaries, refusing further financial support and insisting on family therapy if she wanted to maintain a relationship with them. As for me, I found myself in the strange position of having won completely yet feeling hollow about the victory. The sister I thought I knew had been revealed as someone capable of extraordinary deception and manipulation. The family unity I had always tried to preserve, despite Kimberly's difficult behavior, now seemed irreparably damaged. Yet through the pain and disillusionment, I also felt something unexpected, relief. For years I had carried the burden of being the responsible one, the successful one who should therefore give more, forgive more, understand more. Now, with the truth exposed, that uneven dynamic had finally been broken, painful as the breaking might be. 6 months after the wedding that had become infamous in our social circle, I sat on my penthouse balcony watching the harbor lights shimmer across the water. The space that had become the center of such conflict now felt different to me. Less a symbol of achievement, and more a reminder of how material success can complicate human relationships in unexpected ways. The months following the confrontation had been a period of profound reflection and healing. At my therapist's recommendation, I had taken time away from both work and family, spending 3 weeks hiking the Appalachian Trail. The distance and physical exertion had provided clarity I couldn't find in the familiar surroundings of Boston. Upon returning, I made several significant decisions. First, I established a substantial donation to a housing charity that helped first-time homebuyers from disadvantaged backgrounds with down payments and financial education. The irony wasn't lost on me that while my sister had demanded property she hadn't earned, many hardworking people struggled to achieve even modest homeownership despite their best efforts. Second, I created a scholarship program for aspiring entrepreneurs, focusing particularly on those who, like me, came from middle-class backgrounds without substantial financial safety nets. The scholarship would cover not just education but provide mentorship and networking opportunities one had lacked when starting out. 3 months after our confrontation, Judge Harrison reached out to invite me to dinner. Over excellent steaks and a bottle of Bordeaux, we discussed everything from property law to philosophy, developing a friendship that transcended our unusual introduction. In 30 years on the bench, he told me that evening, I've seen wealth destroy more families than poverty ever did. Money doesn't just reveal character, it amplifies it. Whatever someone is at their core, financial pressure or success will bring that essence to the surface, magnified. His words resonated deeply with my own experience. Kimberly's behavior hadn't been created by my success or her struggles. Those circumstances had merely amplified tendencies that were already present. Around the 4-month mark, my parents called with news about Kimberly. Following the annulment and public embarrassment, she had finally agreed to therapy. Her therapist had diagnosed narcissistic tendencies that had gone unrecognized and untreated for years. Patterns established in childhood when she learned that emotional displays usually got her what she wanted. "She's doing the work, Ethan," my mother said cautiously. "The therapist says it's a long road, but she's actually engaging with the process." Part of her therapy involved making amends where possible. She had written me a letter, which my parents offered to forward if I was open to receiving it. After consideration, I agreed. The letter, 12 pages handwritten, contained a level of self-awareness I had never witnessed from my sister. She traced the origins of her jealousy, her sense of entitlement, and her manipulative behaviors through our childhood and adult years. She acknowledged specific incidents, including the wedding and the penthouse scheme, taking full responsibility without excuses. "I don't expect forgiveness," she wrote toward the end. "I'm not even sure I deserve it. But I am committed to becoming someone who might one day be worthy of being your sister again. Whether that relationship is ever rebuilt or not." The letter moved me deeply, though I remained cautious. Years of patterns couldn't be undone with a single letter, no matter how sincere. I responded with a brief note acknowledging her effort and expressing hope for her continued healing, but making no promises about our future relationship. 5 months after the wedding, Bradford reached out independently. He had accepted a position at a smaller firm in Chicago, taking a significant pay cut but finding the work more ethically aligned with his values. Over coffee, he offered his own apology. "I knew better," he admitted. "Every step of the way, I knew what she was doing was wrong, but I convinced myself it was just family dynamics I didn't understand." By the time I realized how far it had gone, I felt trapped. "Why did you go along with it?" I asked, genuinely curious about his perspective. He considered the question carefully before answering. "At first, it was infatuation. Kimberly has a way of making you feel like the most important person in the world when she wants something from you. By the time I saw past that, I was already compromised professionally. The financial issues at my firm, which were real but exaggerated in your investigator's report, made me desperate enough to consider options I would have dismissed outright earlier in my career." His honesty, while not excusing his actions, helped me understand the complex factors that had led to such an unlikely conspiracy against me. As the 6-month mark approached, I made a decision about the penthouse that had started all the trouble. Despite suggestions from friends that I sell it and find a new home without negative associations, I chose to stay. This space was mine, earned through years of hard work and sacrifice. Allowing the conflict to drive me from my home would be giving it more power than it deserved. Instead, I redesigned key areas, transforming the master bedroom where Kimberly had once declared, "I've always dreamed of living in a place like this," into a peaceful sanctuary with entirely different colors and layout. The home office where she had photographed my documents became a library focused on philosophy, psychology, and personal growth. The penthouse remained my home, but its meaning had evolved. Rather than representing achievement or status, it now symbolized resilience and the importance of protecting what you value, both material and relational. The most profound lessons from this experience had little to do with property, and everything to do with human nature. I learned that standing up for yourself isn't selfish when others' demands are unreasonable. I discovered that documentation and clear boundaries are essential even, perhaps especially, in family relationships. Most importantly, I realized that genuine generosity must be freely given, not coerced, and that healthy relationships cannot be built on obligation or manipulation. Today, as I look out over the harbor where ships come and go, I'm reminded that relationships also have their tides. My relationship with Kimberly remains distant but civil, with occasional text exchanges that suggest the possibility of rebuilding something healthier in the future. My parents and I have grown closer through the painful honesty this situation demanded. And I've developed new friendships, like that with Judge Harrison, that would never have formed without this crisis. The slap that echoed through a wedding hall ultimately led to the truth that needed to be heard. Though painful, that truth has set all of us on more authentic paths. And while I would never have chosen this journey, I've come to appreciate the growth and clarity it has brought. Have you ever had to stand your ground against family pressure or unreasonable demands? How did you handle it, and what did you learn from the experience? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this account of family drama, betrayal, and eventual healing resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with others who might be struggling with similar challenges. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in these difficult situations can make all the difference. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you strength and clarity in your own family relationships.